Hi, this is Professor Barry Brennan. I'm back with my argumentation class. We are in part 2 of Introduction to Argumentation, and we'll move right into discussing the components of an argument. Let's take a look. Here we go. All right, so here we are. So an argument has what we call 3 parts: claims, a claim, evidence, and assumptions, or also known as reasoning or a warrant. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at, there are 3 types of claims. In this class, we'll be focusing on what we call policy claims, because that's what we'd be advocating for, changes in policy, or and we'll talk about what policy is in a minute. But there are 3 types of claims. There's a fact claim, a value claim, and a policy claim. Now, what is a claim? You're like, Ms. Brennan, what's a claim? Claim is just an assertion, right? You're asserting something. You're asserting a fact. You're asserting a value. Something is true or something is false. With a fact, it's something is either true or false. You either can prove it, it's either true, you can verify it, you can prove it, right? Oftentimes facts are related to things that are of scientific nature, or something that's, physically can be proven, or something that can be verified. When we say predictive, something can be verified in the future. Like you say this is going to happen and there's a way to verify that it's going to happen. Let's take like a fact that things are occurring in the atmosphere. Global warming is occurring, and they've been able to prove it by the way the temperature has risen, and they've been able to prove that the burning of fossil fuels, by the way, contributes to the warming of the temperatures here. Why? Because they get caught in the atmosphere and they have no way to get out, which warms up the atmosphere, which is what they call global warming. They've been able to scientifically prove that as a fact. It has anything to do with values. It's not political. There's nothing political about it. These things have become political, but it is a fact. That is what's happening. It's not the first time it's happened. This has happened before in the history of the Earth. The planet has warmed before, and as a result, that's when the Ice Age came. So it's not the first time these things have happened before. It's this kind of warming of the planet. I'm reading a book right now by Bill McGibbon called Falter, and it goes into, and I also read The Sixth Extinction, which talked about this. We've had extinctions in the past, not us as humans as we are now, but before that. So part of this with climate change is a fact that's happening, and it's a natural thing that's happening, and we're just hastening it. Industrialization of the planet, our industrial society has just hastened it. So let's go look at a value claim. So a value claim is basically an assertion where we're asserting something is right or wrong. A value claim is far more about your opinion and your belief. It can't be verified one way or the other. Let's take a good example. A value claim usually value claims involve assertions about religion, right? You can't prove that one way or the other. You can't. You can't prove, at this point, no one can prove like a Christian Bible, who was written from. It wasn't written in the beginning, it was through oral word. And so that oral word was, changing over time. And so whatever was said originally in the Christian Bible, who knows? I mean, probably some is true, but if you ever played the game of telephone, it's changed over time. So are the essence there? Probably. I don't know. I wasn't there. All I know of right now. But they weren't writing, and it was an oral tradition. So with all oral traditions, things get changed over time. And you also have to think about in terms of how we understand it in today's modern world versus how you would understand it, 3,000 years ago. So with that in mind, When we talk about values, it's about right and wrong. They're about our ethics. It's about our morality. And they are very much driven by our culture, our gender, the our nation that we live in, could be our community. So it's really, you can't really prove it. It's something that in some ways there's no way to, as I say here, one method of determining a value of an issue is to have a criteria or standard from which to judge it from. So you have to have that, right? You have to have that in order to decide which is better or which is worse, if that makes any sense. We won't be arguing values. Okay. Policy is a statement or assertion that something should get done. That is what you'll be arguing. You'll be arguing for a policy, a change in a policy, advocating for a different policy or for a new policy or to keep the policy. And usually policies, they include both values and facts. I mean, when you argue a policy, think about it. It is driven by some kind of values that you have. Let's see the policy for, let's say you're going to, right now, they're going to close private prisons. And that's fact and value driven, right? They're going to change the prison system in that way so that people don't make money off the lives of people that have committed crimes and are put in prison. I mean, when you think about that, how the economics, I can see the logic behind the idea of private prisons and running them in terms of like a capitalist perspective. Whether I agree with it or not doesn't really matter. But when you think about, is it ethically and morally right to put money in people's lives and connect them up? Like, if you're going to make money off of people being criminals, think about that, or committing felonies. It's really something to think about. So, well, let's just keep going with that. So that's what you're going to be looking at. And let's look at the other components of an argument. So remember the claim, that's your assertion. The assertion that you're asserting something, you're claiming something, you're stating something. Your evidence is, how are you going to back it up? Those of you who take in public speaking, your evidence are your supporting materials. How do you back up what you're going to say? Right? It's not enough to say it. You got to back it up with something. You'll be being asked to do this in class, right? When you say, when you make a statement, you make a claim about something, you need to back it up with some kind of evidence. What is evidence? What you use to support your claim. It could be data, it could be statistics, it could be facts, it could be laws, it could be policies. So let's go back to the closing of private prisons, or taking that away and making prisons only federal or state run, no longer private. Someone had to come up with an argument to support the reasons why we should not have that. Okay, they had to come up with facts. Maybe they decided that the motivation behind private prisons is bad and this is what happens. And as you know, brown and black men, mostly black men, are disproportionately imprisoned over all other men in society, especially white men. And so looking at that, like how do we reckon with that, just that piece, in addition to other racist policies that we have? They had to use statistics. They had to use maybe looking at different laws that are in place in other places, or laws that are in place nationally or federally or in different states. That's how they would make their argument. I'm going to pause for a second and I'll be right back. My phone seems to be going off the hook right now. So hang on one second, I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. So this is your evidence piece of how you're going to back up your claim. Okay? Then we look at reasoning. So the reasoning, that's the logic that you use, your critical thinking skills. That's Are you doing this deductively or are you doing it inductively? And we'll talk about more of that later on. But that's basically like your warrant, your reason behind it, right? Let's think about that. The abolition or the abolishment of, I shouldn't say it, well, abolition works. The abolishment of private prisons. What do you think the reasoning is behind that? Like if you were to think about it, come up with your own ideas. I would say the idea that I talk about, there's a disproportionate amount of brown and black men that are in prison over other races of people, that might be part of the reasoning, the warrant, the reason why we should do it. And then the motivation. There's something not ethical about being motivated to imprison people if you make more money. Like the motivation, if you want to stay in business, and what does it mean to stay in business, to have private prisons, to be in business, to imprison people? It sounds so much like, and this is probably the reasoning, and I can catch on to this reasoning, it sounds so much like slavery, right? It's like the motivation to, or keep people in that place is that they were benefiting off the backs of black people in the South by cotton and all their kind of agriculture there in slavery. It's like, think about that. I don't know, there's a little bit of a relationship. I can kind of get the reasoning. Maybe I'm going off on a tangent, but I can see it. So that's what you're looking at, the reasoning. What's your reasoning behind that? Moving on. Okay. What do we mean by critical thinking? This is, how do you become a good critical thinker? Something that you really want to think about. How are you going to become, what are the traits of a good critical thinker? And I'm going to stop. I'll be stopping here and moving on to the next video in a second. But I want you to think about that. What are the traits of a good critical thinker? I want you to think about that yourself. What do you think they are? Just think about that. And we'll come back in a minute and we're going to talk more about this. Okay. I'll see you then.